How long can you hold your breath? Imagine taking a single breath, then plummeting hundreds of feet down into the ocean on a weighted sled. Welcome to the extreme sport of no-limits freediving.
People have a hard time understanding that what we do is possible without being crazy, risk-driven freaks.
Mucha gente tiene miedo y se preocupa por cosas que no saben, que no entienden.
Statistically, it's the safest extreme sport on the planet. I'm not at risk. I have a huge safety team. I think downhill skiing is just batshit nuts.
On October 12, 2002, Audrey Mestre attempted to break the no-limits world record by diving 564 feet on a single breath of air. Audrey had been married to Pepin Ferreras, a world record freediver with cult-like celebrity status within the sport. Sports Illustrated described their relationship. Carried away by love, for risk and for each other, two of the world's best freedivers went to the limits of their sport. Only one came back.
When you live on that edge and you're driven to that extreme, we see it play out in sports all the time, and football, as dangerous as that is, it isn't risky enough for certain types of human beings. You know, there's something in them that needs to push it further and further, and one mistake or whatever happened is all it's going to take to tip it into tragedy.
Sports Illustrated billed the story as one of love and obsession. But was this an underwater tale of star-crossed lovers?
She's probably one of the most beautiful people I ever been around. And there were no match. There were no match between those two. It was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, or the Beast and the Beauty.
She obviously loved the guy, but on the other hand, Pepin is pretty much more in love with himself before anybody else. That was the toughest part for her.
I met Audrey when she and Pepin did a tandem world record dive. My impression was that Pepin and Audrey were very much in love and that they were soulmates, that they both enjoyed the same sport and that it brought them closer.
Pepin is a product of his own imagination. The Pepin we see is the character Pepin in the movie Pepin, written, directed, and produced by Pepin. The stuff on the cutting room floor probably didn't look as good as the stuff that the public saw.
Pepin hired a ghostwriter to pen his autobiography.
What had been presented to me as kind of a romantic tragedy, the more I looked into it, I felt like that was a very simplistic depiction of what happened, and it was really a needless tragedy. The main problem I had with him as a writer was that he was kind of an unreliable narrator, and it's really hard to write a book about somebody if you don't believe half of what they say.
Francisco Pepin Ferreras was born in Cuba on January 18, 1962.
For Pepin, a lot of this goes back to what he grew up with as a child, the body he was born into. He's got deformed legs and feet. He's got orthopedic shoes. He's got asthma. He's got really bad eyesight, thick glasses. And kids make fun of him. And so he discovers, thanks to an uncle who puts him in the water, that he can swim before he can walk.
I felt like there's a God that lives down there in the base of the ocean. And this is the God that protects me from what I do.
As the young Cuban healed from his ailments, the water also provided him a living as a spear fisherman.
He would come up with some very far-fetched tales. One of my favorites was one day he was freediving for fish, and lo and behold, he looked next to him was a Soviet submarine. I said, Pepin, you're really sure you want to put this in the book? Yes, he wanted to put that in.
As a competitive freediver in his early 20s, Pepin was able to hold his breath longer and dive deeper than anyone who challenged him.
Suddenly we had this Latin guy that became some kind of a instantaneous hero for every single one of us.
Pepin's exploits were legendary, both in the water and out, where he was known as a ladies' man. But Pepin was also a risk-taker, pushing the limits of freediving.
He'd been in the hospital, he'd had blackouts, he'd had the bends.
In 1992, the International Association for the Development of Apnea, or IDA, was formed to sanction world records and to establish safety standards.
Pepin was in open disagreement with those standards. He was just doing things his own way.
So Pepin established the International Association of Freedivers, or IAFD, in order to sanction his own dives, free from the rules of IDA.
More than a sport, it's a quest. The day that I cannot freedive no more, I'm going to elevate myself and go to a different dimension.
By his early 30s, Pepin's persona had become mythic.
I've heard him called Svengali. Do you think that description fits?
I don't think the Svengali analogy is a good one in this case. Pepin wasn't the one who tried to meet Audrey, it was the other way around. Audrey sounds like she had this schoolgirl-like crush on him before she ever met him. She was fascinated with him.
At 21, Audrey Mestre was a French national living in Mexico studying marine biology. She wrote her thesis paper about how the human body adapts to survive at extreme depths. The focus of her paper was Pepin Feredes.
I chose him as a subject of my thesis because he was the world champion freediver.
I got impressed for this young girl who's asking me questions that not other people ask me.
But that's very different than falling in love with her. How long did it take for that to happen?
About 2 days.
There was an incredible intersection between two people here. I mean, both of them felt trapped inside their bodies. Audrey's wasn't at birth like Pepin's was. Audrey at 14 gets typhoid fever. It creates a scoliosis in her back that she has to be put in this really hard plastic corset for a number of years. And the only time she's allowed out of that is in the water. And her grandfather happens to be a spear diving champion. And so she still has this one place where she can be free.
Like Pepin, Audrey managed to recover from her hardships. And while studying marine biology in Mexico, she by chance saw a poster featuring the subject of her thesis.
Here's this mythic character who's the world record holder. She finds out that he's going to be diving in Cabo San Lucas, and it's not that far away. She hops on a bus, and suddenly she's in this world of his. By the next day, Audrey's assisting him on his training dives that week.
On the second day, Audrey experienced firsthand the high risks associated with the sport when one of Pepin's safety divers died during routine training.
Suddenly death is in the picture, and Audrey handles it with such poise and calm, more than anybody in his crew really, that there's one more allure for Pepin about this woman. So you really do have a lot of elements of the myth in this whole story. It's kind of a reverse Icarus. Instead of going up to the sun, it's the opposite, it's the descent. And in no time, they're off filming around the world. I mean, Pepin has these deals to do movies and TV series.
I believe that for Audrey, she really was all about the ocean. She wanted to go with the animals. Her favorite thing was to dive with the animals, the sharks, the dolphins. People think of mermaids. She was the original mermaid.
She had something, but not many people have. Some people are touched, and they can bond with things, especially with the underwater world. Nothing would swim really away from her. That's what we always said.
Within a few years, Pepin and Audrey were married.
When I started interacting with Pepin, no one had really done any biomedical measurements. This device is an oceanographic instrument that was adapted for use for freediving.
Kim McCoy's computer recorded the physiological strains freedivers experience: heart rate, lung compression, and blood shift.
We set it up to measure about 4 times a second. So very detailed analysis that gave us a flight recorder when pilots were trying to see how high they could fly. But at a certain point, without added oxygen, they started blacking out. This is sort of the inverse with freediving. How deep can they go and still metabolically survive?
Most frequently, metabolic stress would result in blackouts. And Pepin, by then in his late 30s, was suffering from them more and more.
Lo acabamos de chequear en la computadora. Pasaron 40 segundos en el fondo. En los últimos 3 metros se desmayó.
Dime, porque tú eres una esposa de qué pensamos.
No, o sea, esas cosas suceden, no. Yo tengo muchísima confianza en lo que él hace y en lo que hacemos.
Pepin's starting to realize he can't go on forever, but he's got this younger mirror image of himself that he can be the person who unleashes this new force on the diving world. Why not?
And so Pepin began training Audrey in No Limits.
When your mind is ready and when you can do something with your mind, that you can do it with the body will follow your mind. And my mind is very ready.
Audrey's first No Limits record dive was for the French nationals. Under the watchful eye of her mother, Audrey would attempt a depth of 80 meters, or 263 feet.
I felt privileged to be around her as she transitioned from being literally just an extra on a set to being star talent.
It was wonderful to see her because it came very natural to her. It was always the girl next door who comes up after the dive and was like very likable.
It was sort of A Star is Born, the declining older man and the rising younger woman.
But Audrey was not the only rising star on the horizon.
There she goes.
Oddly, it's because of Pepin that I started freediving. No Limits freediving for me has always been about traveling to the edge of myself, but really pushing hard.
Tanya Streeter's first No Limits attempt was for the women's world record. She would hold a single breath of air for nearly 3 minutes, descending to a depth of 113 meters, or 371 feet. Tanya handled the pressure with ease and was an overnight sensation. Suddenly, No Limits freediving was sexy.
Anybody who says that sex doesn't sell is a liar, because it does. And you have a sport which is perceived as being a little dangerous. You have a woman that is attractive and is sexy to the media, and that helps us in selling her and her sport.
Within no time, Tanya had attracted top-notch sponsors.
It was like something just sparking in our brain in general and say, hey, nice, why not?
Carlos and Pepin began a campaign to attract sponsors for Audrey.
She didn't wear her emotions publicly, but she certainly had great concerns.
Concerns about what?
Well, she was concerned about who she was. Her significant other, Pepin, was 12 or 13 years her elder, and she was coming into her own.
In January of 2000, at the age of 38, Pepin Ferreras attempted his deepest dive ever, 163 meters or 535 feet.
Audrey's now on eggshells about how much further he can go, and she's got to watch him like a hawk.
During his ascent, Pepin suffered from a blackout that left him unconscious for more than a minute, invalidating the dive.
That blackout in January of 2000 in Cozumel, Mexico, was a pivotal moment in Pepin's life.
So now his immortality quest may have to play out through her.
In May of 2000, Pepin arranged for Audrey to make her first women's world record attempt. On the team were photographers Guido Bras and Nick Buckley, deep water safety divers Pascal Barnaby and Cedric Darolis, and Kim McCoy from Ocean Sensors. As a publicity stunt, Pepin arranged for a helicopter to demonstrate how deep Audrey's dive would be. 125 meters, or 411 feet.
The idea was like she was holding onto the line, and then we had the shot up to the helicopter and one shot down from me to give the impression like, how great is that? Wow. She was super fit. She was an awesome spirit. She was glowing. You know, we were joking about her, man. Maybe she's like, carrying something there.
The first Audrey record I assist, it was in Canary Island. On the beginning, it was only the job, and more and more, it started to be more a friendship.
Although Audrey reached her target depth of 125 meters, upon surfacing, she suffered from a blackout.
It always takes a little bit of a minute before these guys are completely there again.
Under IDA rules, Audrey's blackout would have invalidated the dive. But Pepin's own IAFD declared Audrey the new women's world record holder.
Pepin knew that he could push Audrey much, much further. That was never her way of going, yes, that's what I want to do. I want to do a record. No, that was him. She would go like, hey, there's another record. You happy?
No, not really.
She's been the student and he the teacher, and then that starts to reverse. She's picking it up in a few years, what he'd built up over a lifetime.
If Audrey was closing in on Pepin, Tanya Streeter was aiming to blow past him in a world record attempt of 160 meters, or 525 feet.
Up until that point, the deepest I'd done in No Limits was 113 meters.
We've got the IV lines, got the intubation set in there, the resuscitation drugs in here, adrenaline.
When it comes to safety, she's my wife first and an athlete second. I want to make sure that she's coming back. The pony tank that's on the sled is the most important piece of equipment. I have to make sure that there's actually air in the lift tank to bring her back up. And I would fill it myself.
I knew this was a huge depth, and I knew that if she achieved it, it was going to be an overall record, the men's and the women's world record.
Okay, everybody, we got a 10-minute countdown until dive time.
At T-minus 10 minutes, the safety divers prepare to descend. Unlike free divers who take in no air underwater, safety divers must stop to decompress on their way back up.
A dive that takes me 3.5 minutes takes my deepest diver 3.5 hours. Every one of my divers was in a buddy team standard diving rules.
We had 16 divers, probably every 50 or 60 feet. And so worst case scenario, we could relay Tanya back to the surface fairly quickly. And every diver in the water had a pony tank and a lift bag. And at any time, they could clip it onto Tanya's suit, they could release the airbag, and within seconds, she would be sent to the surface.
While her mother anxiously watched, Tanya packed enough air into her lungs to last the 3.5-minute dive.
At 0.
At 0, I have to go. I blacked out.
Okay.
And I fell forwards. Essentially, that big breath just puts too much pressure on my heart. Can't beat properly, can't send oxygenated blood to the brain. I looked at the judge, who was right here, and said, can I go?
Can I go? 30.
And I could almost hear the ticking going on in his head as he went through the rules, and there was no rule. There's no rule at that time about blacking out beforehand. There's only a rule about blacking out afterwards. And I said, can I go? And he, yeah, okay. And so I packed a couple of times and I went. So that was the roughest imaginable start. Effectively, I dived with about 80% of my volume of air that I would need to be able to equalize that deep. I already don't know what's going to happen to my body at 160 meters. I definitely don't know what's going to happen to my body at any meters, leaving after just waking up from a blackout.
I can feel her braking on the lines, but I can also hear the diver, so I know how deep she's going.
45 seconds, dive time.
I have a mask and snorkel on when I'm in the water, and the minute she disappears, I put my head in the water and watch her as far as I can. And then you can hear things in the water too, because her safety divers tap their tanks with metal sticks.
Every meter was just really excruciatingly painful. And I got to 110 meters and I had to stop the sled because I couldn't equalize. And then I had a choice to make. You know, is this where I decide that it's just too hard and I turn around? And I have always said to myself on every free dive, if it isn't something that's physical that is stopping you, then it's mental. And is your mind going to be your weapon or your weakness? I owe my success to making my mind my weapon, and this dive wasn't any different. And I could hear them right next to me. Go, Tanya, go, Tanya.
All through the training, the rule was do the same thing every single time, and she had, and then she did something different on record day.
When I got to the bottom, there's 3 things that I have to do. 1 is to put my hand on the lift bag because that's my ride out of there. 2 is to open the valve on the tank, to just pop it open so that air is put into the lift bag. And 3 is to pull the pin. 1, 2, 3, 3 steps. And what I did is I put my hand on the lift bag, I opened the tank valve, and I blew a kiss to the sea. And to me, I had done 3 steps. 1, 2, 3.
Tanya was suffering from nitrogen narcosis, a kind of drunkenness experienced by divers at great depths.
Blowing that kiss to the sea was one extra element, and she forgot what she was doing.
There was I in my come to Jesus moment where I thought, this is going to be sad. You can see at the bottom that I'm struggling to figure things out. You can also see my safety diver. He's letting me figure it out, but he's getting that lift bag out and he's approaching my back with it because he knows that if that lift bag that I'm messing with doesn't get me out of there, click that on and I'm back up. I remembered that I hadn't pulled the pin and I just quickly pulled the pin and started going back up again.
But Tanya's narcosis had cost her 17 critical seconds.
2 minutes 50.
Coming down.
I went past Paul like a rocket. There's a stream, this massive stream of bubbles. You can't even see me. He said today he didn't even know that I was in the bubbles or not in the bubbles. He just goes, whoop, like that. It goes by so fast.
The moment he found out that Tanya Streeter had done the record, he went ballistic. For Pepin, he had possession over Audrey and Audrey's records, so he felt that what Tanya Streeter did more than against Audrey, it was against him.
If I'm honest, I think the reason that Pepin pushed Audrey was because Pepin couldn't do it himself. And I know that's really inflammatory, and I hope he doesn't know where I live, but I truly believe that.
Just 6 weeks after Tanya's dive, Team Pepin headed to the Dominican Republic for Audrey to begin training.
The whole reason for us to be in Dominican Republic in October instead of December, as we had planned before, it was Tanya Streeter.
Tanya had made it to 160 meters. For Audrey to break the record, she would only have to dive 161 meters.
Pepin wants his wife, Audrey, to kick her ass really, really hard and trying to beat the men's record as Tanya did.
She don't make decisions on that kind of stuff. He told her to do it, she do it.
But 2 key missing members of the team were Nick Buckley and Guido Bras.
Specifically, I asked her 3 times. I said, are you guys going to do anything this year? Oh, no, we're going to stay low. We have no sponsorship. Nothing's going to happen. And I made different plans.
Also not on the team was deepwater safety diver Cedric Derolis, who had died the previous year in a cave diving accident.
Cedric had died, so they lost the 130-meter support diver, Now they had a big gap in the water column.
Kim McCoy provided the computers that would validate the depth.
Pepin just kept pushing her to go deeper and deeper and deeper every single time. When she was able to do a depth that would exceed any record ever done before by anyone, then I felt relief. I said, well, okay, we have enough now, more than enough, by a few meters. 170 meters, that was on Wednesday, October 9th. After the dive, instead of being happy, she was quite depressed. I noticed there was a bruise in one of Audrey's eyes. It was a light bruise right there. Where the bruise came from, I have no idea, but I noticed actually that she was not feeling good at all.
The rumors were flying thick and fast. There was a rumor that Audrey had discovered she was pregnant.
She probably wanted to get divorced with Pepin after the record. That was the rumor in DR.
There was a lot of loud and angry discussions with her husband Pepin. There was a lot of friction between him, Pepin, and Audrey. It was not really a good day before the dive day.
The day of the dive, that morning, it was very stormy. So the countdown was stopped.
Everybody was there for the record, so Pepin said, no, I'm going for it.
It cleared up rather quickly. The countdown resumed, and a big crowd gathered on the beach where Audrey was to board a launch and be taken out to the dive site.
Audrey was just very withdrawn. Obviously, something was just not right.
Her mood was bizarre. She was cut off as if in a soundproof, clear booth that moved with her. She stood at the edge of the water and stared into the ocean.
Something was not right. Pepin was very nervous. He was like all over the place.
It was troubling. There was a lot going on that it didn't feel quite right, yet it just, like Greek tragedy, ground on toward this end that everyone could see coming.
It was actually 2 times when people asked if the bottle was filled with air, and I could hear Pepin reply, get away from it and take care of other things. Just leave it alone. I already take care of the bottle. It's filled. Leave it.
So I said, okay, fine. Just kind of put the equipment there and left it, and really went back to my own business of doing what I needed to do as a surface diver.
I just couldn't see the future. I just couldn't see it. For me, it was just an event.
But this event, due to lack of safety protocols, would have never been sanctioned by IDA. Although Audrey had plenty of safety divers on the surface, the deep water safety divers were another story. Compared to Tanya's 16, Audrey had 2.
Organizamos, yo estaba a cargo de los usos. Ya acercando a los receptivos, yo bajo a 80 metros, que fue mi posición, con aire comprimido. Había solamente para Pascal Bernabé, que iba a estar en 172 metros.
Even with Pascal at 172 meters and Wiki at 80 meters, that left a gaping hole at the 130-meter mark.
The gap at 130 meters was a gap that really was just underfunded. Cedric had passed away, and the cost of a mixed gas diver with experience was not zero.
But Pepin, determining the rules with his own organization, the IAFD, proceeded despite the obvious dangers.
Like usual, 4-5 minutes before she starts diving, I was descending fast, on the cable.
At T-minus 3 minutes, Wiki began his descent to the 80-meter mark. Audrey used the remaining time to pack enough air for the 3.5-minute dive. A kiss from Pepin, and Audrey took her final breath.
I was keeping pretty careful track of the time, as I always do. I suppose I was 20 meters from the dive boat in a little skiff.
I'm holding the line, and Pepin was doing the same also from the water, because we get to feel the vibration coming from the sled, just going under and brushing against the cable. So we have a way to determine more or less what's going on. When I look at Pepin, it was as if something was just not right. But on the other hand, nothing was wrong.
Y le doy la señal de que está en 80 metros. Ella pasó por delante de mí, que iba bien, perfecto.
I had the feeling something was not right before she hit the bottom. It takes decades of experience, but if you look at a line, you can see how it's oscillating in the water column. This can be caused by current, but it also be caused by the tension on the line and the fluctuating tension on the line. And it just didn't look quite right.
A minute and a half into the dive, to tell Audrey she was nearing the 170-meter mark, Pascal clanged his pipes.
I saw Audrey arriving like usual, you know, fast.
At 1 minute and 42 seconds, Audrey's sled reached the bottom of the line.
And then the first bad surprise, when she finished to open this tank, which was supposed to fill the lift bag, nothing happened. So I took one of my regulators and I inflate with my own gas. Then she starts to ascend.
But Audrey's rate of ascent was far too slow. Had there been a safety diver at 130 meters, they would have seen that Audrey was still struggling. But the next closest diver was Wiki, 90 meters above.
Y pasaron 30, 40, 50, un minuto, y ella no salía. Y no salía.
Pascal Barnaby, who was at 170 meters on a trimix, he could not rise very fast. He did rise faster than he should have because he realized, too, that something had gone awry. He last saw Audrey at about 165 meters, 162 meters.
We counted the time. After 3 minutes, she's supposed to be back between 3 to 3:15, 3:20 minutes. And then you don't see the sled moving. When she's coming back, you see the cables moving fast because she's flying back out. And then, you know, you don't see the divers doing anything in the top.
I thought, well, okay, it's taking a little bit longer than planned. That's not so bad. It's only 3.5 minutes. No big deal. No distress, no signs of distress on the dive boat.
Through his snorkel, he was just screaming, "Fuck!" Pepin was screaming up to the surface boat that he wanted his scuba gear. And they throw down the scuba gear to Pepin, and it took him 1 minute to put it on.
In the blue, I saw that she left the cable.
Pascal found her at 124, drifting like a leaf in autumn through the water column.
She was in blackout, so I ascend very fast, really very fast, probably my fastest ascent.
Cuando yo veo que el sled viene lentamente, solo, digo, ¿qué pasó?
The moment the people at surface knew something was terribly awry was when the lift bag came to the surface and there was no Audrey.
And of course, at that point, my heart probably was beating probably 3 times faster than normal because I knew that something had happened to her already at that point.
Everything is like insane. You know, well, what you really having?
It truly is astounding to me that so little was put in place for her safety. And I mean no disrespect to the divers that were in the water to her, because I don't believe that somebody can dive and do safety for somebody else with intent not to help them. What I don't understand is that whoever is in charge of the logistics on a dive like this, and for me that's my husband, why that person doesn't put every single system in place for safety. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Pascal had ascended with Audrey unconscious to 90 meters, where he had to stop. To ascend any farther without decompression would be risking his own life.
So at 90 meters, Pascal had no other choice other than stay there and wait to see if someone would help him. And there was no one. Until Pepin descended with a tank, took an immense risk of his own to save his wife.
Pepin was able to quickly eat his spinach and race down, dive bomb down to whatever, 90 meters or something. Madness. Crazy dive.
A buscarla, siento que una persona me vira la cabeza, me tumba la cabeza hacia un lado y me pasa por encima. Cuando reacciono que veo, Pepin bajó de allá arriba, de superficie, a rescatarla a ella, con un tanque. Pepin.
And then, at this moment, Pepin arrived and catch her and ascend.
Donde él viene, le quita a Audrey, a Pascal, se la pone de espalda a él, ella de espalda a él, sucedió en superficie.
He risked his life not only in taking the dive to 90 meters on air, but also in the rate of ascent.
Pepin's going so fast on the way up that his head is above the bubbles. The bubbles are just being left behind. And that goes completely against rule number 1 in scuba diving, that you are not to ascend any faster than your smaller bubble.
Pascal, ahí tuve 2 horas haciendo descompresión. Lo que sucedió en la superficie lo he visto en video. Es monstruoso lo que sucedió en la superficie.
When Pepin finally surfaced with Audrey, 8 minutes and 38 seconds had passed.
When they popped up out of the water, I was taken aback. She was supine in the water. A lot of pink foam was coming out of her mouth.
Over another minute passed as Pepin frantically tried to resuscitate Audrey in the water.
It seemed to be going in slow motion, and I remember thinking, good heavens, why are they moving so slowly?
You're doing a world record. Supposed to be qualified people there. When she get out of the water, it's supposed to be a real doctor there.
When Audrey was finally lifted into the boat, the doctor turned out not to be a medical doctor.
I was in the water when they were screaming after the doctor, and he was like, I'm not a doctor, I'm a dentist.
She certainly did have a pulse. I saw it with my own eyes. She needed at least a recompression chamber or a medical doctor skilled in hyperbaric medicine. There were none.
After 8 minutes, 38 seconds, you don't need a doctor, you need a miracle.
They got her into a launch and headed for shore, and I could see Matt trying to do CPR.
At that time, she still had a pulse, and we kept rolling her on her side because the foam was still coming out of her mouth and nose, just pouring out, so it was
really had a difficult time getting any kind of air in her. And when we got to shore, I expected to see a backboard or something on the beach, or a Stokes litter or something like that. But no, they had nothing like that. I couldn't believe that we were on the beach and they were fumbling around trying to get a beach chair to take her to the infirmary. It was pretty chaotic as far as getting her from that boat to the infirmary. And it was a long trek because it was up the beach through I remember we went through some walkways. I didn't even know where it was. When we got there, they were painting in the infirmary. The whole thing was crazy.
Everything was wrong from the beginning to the end. I mean, it's like the girl don't have a little brain to survive that day.
It took more than 30 minutes to get Audrey to the nearest hospital, where shortly after arrival, she was pronounced dead.
I had a phone call from Kim. He said that she was dead. And the first thing what he said to us is that Pippin, well, if I and Nick would have been there, she would have been still alive. So. Shocks you a little bit.
On the following day, 4 of us, it was Carlos Serra, myself, Pepin, and Matt Brisno, were called down to the homicide department. And we were interrogated individually to see if there might have been some wrongdoing.
Me, I don't speak any Spanish, so they elected not to talk to me. I think they talked to Pepin for 5 minutes maybe, Carlos for a couple of minutes, and that was it.
They closed it as a drowning investigation or a drowning accident.
In the Dominican Republic, only an immediate family member could request an investigation, and neither Pepin nor Audrey's parents did so.
I'm certain that if something would have happened, something like that here in the United States, the investigation would have gone a lot deeper.
In a private ceremony, Audrey's parents were present for the scattering of her ashes. As Pepin released Audrey to the sea, he was about to become the focus of a firestorm of accusations. Audrey Mestre's death stunned the freediving community. How could this have happened?
What we have here is a graphic representation. I spent almost every waking moment trying to figure out what happened because no one knew what happened. You can see in this portion here where Pepin...
His analysis of the data was all very impressive, but even then it made one just want to grab one's head and say, yes, of course, but did he kill her?
There was an autopsy on Audrey, and the doctor said that it was just drowning and it was an accident. There was no air in the bottle. And that was the main thing. In Sweden, we call this manslaughter, and you will spend a lot of years in prison.
Accusations exploded on the internet, mostly directed at Pepin. Repeatedly, people asked, why didn't Audrey take air from Pascal, her safety diver? Though no one knows for certain, the conventional wisdom is that taking air at such depths would cause the lungs to explode.
Pepin was under a lot of pressure. I mean, in his world, on those websites, there were accusations flying.
There's so many people that want to hang him for a lot of things, but he didn't want her to die. I know that for sure.
When Gary Smith's Sports Illustrated article caught the eye of Hollywood director James Cameron, Pepin suddenly found himself back in the spotlight.
It's an honor for me to be here working with Pepin Federes. This is in preparation for a movie that I want to make about Pepin and his wife, Audrey.
As part of Cameron's research, Pepin agreed to do an homage dive to Audrey on the 1-year anniversary of her death. The setting was Cabo San Lucas in Mexico, the very place where Pepin and Audrey had first met.
It was Hollywood. We had movie stars coming there, you know, Salma Hayek, and then these guys showed up because they were all like casting kind of for the rules for being Audrey.
But Pepin's problems were not over. His longtime business partner, Carlos Serra, was casting doubt about whether Audrey's death was, in fact, an accident.
When Pepin was at the peak of his, fame and glory with James Cameron filming and Salma Hayek was actually there, that's when I left.
Pepin was attempting Audrey's dive of 170 meters. It had been nearly 3 years since his last record attempt.
Pepin has just set a world's record of 170 meters, matching the feat that Audrey completed 1 year ago.
Although Pepin's dive was a success, it would be his last. But Audrey's last dive was still being scrutinized.
I wrote a book. It took a long time. Quietly, I started to investigate the equipment. I checked into the gear, I checked into the pony tank, the lift back, the sled itself, the cable. I checked into all of that. And my conclusion was a definite one. There was no equipment failure. It was just the pony tank being empty what actually determined Audrey's fate. So that's when I started to investigate and went further into something else, maybe another possibility.
Carlos concluded that Pepin did not intend to murder Audrey, but rather that he had sent her down with an empty pony tank so that he could perform a heroic rescue. Despite his daredevil dive, the plan failed when he was unable to bring Audrey to the surface in time.
Here was somebody who knew the couple probably better than anyone else. And after you read the book, Carlos's explanation of it is the only one that makes sense.
I'm not sure it was true. It's so complex, it's so easy to, who is responsible, but I was there and I don't think any accusation is sure or is true for sure.
Pepin Ferreras has repeatedly and emphatically denied any wrongdoing in his wife's death.
Whose responsibility was it, Pepin, to fill her tank?
Well, there was a whole team work. It was a tragic mistake. It was something that nobody wanted to happen, and we had to learn how to live with this.
It gets into very deep and mysterious human terrain that we can point at and guess at, but to know, I don't think anybody can. So there's the conundrum, and here we are still scratching our heads.
Pepin's image can be seen on billboards all over Miami, peddling his latest venture, ShapeQuest Nutrition. Pepin Ferreras refused all requests to be interviewed for this film.
This particular record has been a blessing and a curse. I'm part of a story that led to other people losing their life, going deeper. A chapter will close for me when somebody else breaks that record.
But after more than a decade, no woman has beaten Tanya Streeter's record. Perhaps the only one who could have was Audrey Mestre, but she is gone. Had she lived, would she have kept trying to go deeper?